Now when it comes to, hold up, say it with me.
Now when it comes to Drake and Kendrick Lamar.
Today is gonna be a bigger video, but it is gonna be a good one. So leave those likes, subscribe, and tell me your favorite Drake nickname before we get started. And now, before we get into this massive topic we are going to discuss and how Kendrick Lamar has been waiting for us to have this very conversation, well, leave those likes if you have not, but on a serious note, going into today, just keep these two series of bars from Kendrick Lamar in the back of your head, which now the first is for Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers Track 3 Worldwide Steppers, and it says this, and the second is from Meet the Grams, and within the all-time whooping that Drake got, Kendrick added in some stuff about the whole industry which said this. And now, while there are multiple different weirdos that Kendrick has been warning us about in a fashion that we are really only starting to understand the scale of now, what everything recently has had me thinking about is arguably the most important message that Kendrick Lamar has made in maybe his entire career. Which again, when you think of Kendrick being one of the best storytellers and one of the most important thinkers of maybe the last 20, 30, 40, 50, or even more years, what I really think measures importance is how he was able to get his message and force people to interact with the very things that he stands for. Well, just beyond the usual things that he did, and really with that, of course, this brings us to the Super Bowl halftime show over everything else, because now on one hand here, well, of course for rap, this was Kendrick taking the throne and that #1 spot forever and ruining Drake and the era that he wanted to stay in a way that nobody could have ever foreseen at a point in time. But also, beyond the amount of viewers, the people and organizations involved, and everything there, which also did increase the stakes in of itself, when you see a performance that was mocking a man for suing, putting this really turning point and moment that challenged people to think right on TV for everybody to see, all while Kendrick showed how big music can really be, and even just describing the game that we all have been playing with Samuel L. Jackson's inclusion and everything he was doing with the narration and the concept of the show. Well, within all of this, when you see that the guy who, for the purposes of this video, we are going to call Super Drake, or the guy Drake wishes he was, and you get what I am saying, literally being there to see this. Well, now with that, in a way, while Kendrick has been beefing with the entire music industry, the rap ruiners, and Drake, also through mocking Drake and by giving the most creative halftime performance ever with the storytelling and messaging, well, he also called out the other guy who was watching the whole thing and at least tried to show him how ridiculous he will look for suing, silencing, and crashing out. And I say all of this to say that when we see the place in time we are all at and the way Kendrick Lamar's messages have been revealing themselves to be bigger and bigger as all of this has went along, well, once again, when you hear specific lyrics like the ones we just looked at, and also the bigger picture of what Kendrick has been trying to prove and say all along, well, ultimately, Kendrick Lamar and the pursuit of transparency and real and proper expression has put the ball in place for everything to crumble down on the music side of things, but also for us to really understand it in a way we never would be able to. Because seriously, with an egomaniac fraud mega Karen in the Cupcake Drake starting to sue and trying to shut down people that he does not like for rapping badly about him, and then again with that, when you see the mirror between Kendrick versus Drake in rap, and then what all of this means in the real world, and especially with what went down at the halftime show, there's just so many layers that have been added to this thing, and that are only getting added to this thing as we are seeing everything unfold. But beyond dissing these types of people in the cupcake archetype, Kendrick has also warned everybody that the rappers who are portraying a lifestyle and image of something that is promoting negativity and trying to silence others but may be the very thing they are sworn against, and well, again, when we talk about it, there's a Kendrick bar for everything. Of course, we can look at the lines from Squabble Up, which have turned out to really mirror what's going on with Young Thug and everything there. And back to some of the darker things going on in the industry, when Kendrick said on Whacked Out Murals about how everybody's laughing about Puff, but everybody is on trial. Well, with lines like these and the ones from Meet the Grams, Kendrick has also warned us about people who are called the same name as Ice Cube's 1992 album, and if you're a hip-hop head, you're laughing, but if not, you'll figure it out later. And seemingly, and if you haven't put it together, this brings us to the David situation. And with this, what I'm gonna say real quick is that while some people were asking me to make a video specifically on this topic and talk about the whole thing, well, I'm gonna be honest, I thought Muppet Drake was funnier, and I'm never gonna be the guy who talks about the same thing that every person is jumping on to try and get their 5 seconds of fame from it and just add nothing to the commentary, because again, I talk about the inner workings and fall-offs of rap stars here and how that actually affects the culture and music and the ethos of what we have understood around the very thing we are all here for, which is hip-hop. And so I'm just not going to throw on that tinfoil hat and be a detective on something of that scale, because there's really nothing in terms of what everybody's raving about that is related to the music. And instead, I would rather offer perspective and insight that will help us understand and look at this specific situation and the insanity of it better. And how I'm going to do that is here. And now for rap and music as a whole, I think with all of the fall-offs and really just ways that artists have been exposed, but then also the ways that labels are still standing by them, and even if they're canceling tours or quote-unquote not promoting records, I mean, again, look at the David thing, you know they're happy that they're getting a nice little streaming boost from this. We have hit a turning point that really, when you line up what we are seeing now with Kendrick Lamar's warnings and the reactions we have seen to those very statements with what's going on in the bigger media landscape, I mean, it really does just seem like the music industry and everything specifically that kind of started with Kendrick and Drake is mirroring every other thing that we are seeing. And maybe that's because Drake is the musical version of the other thing that I definitely can't say, but have to say is totally great. But we can't just stop at the egomaniac Karens, because really, why I think this is such an important topic to discuss and why it's important to look at this through the lens of Kendrick Lamar specifically, well, in the basic sense, is because in an industry where everybody is driven by ego, and even the people who are not just really want to come in, do their job, get what they need to get, and exit, Kendrick is somebody who is trying to speak to the greater well-being of all of us, and not in a way where, again, he is this perfect figure, because this is what Mr. Morale was about, and I often do think this is where Drake fans just misconceive everything Kendrick is trying to say and try to push some weird narratives that are just fake. But over and over again, as Kendrick has told us, he is a flawed and imperfect man, and the only real difference between him and all these other guys is that he has the guts to tell us that. And really, when we look at the Drakes, the Davids, the Young Thugs, and all of these other people on the spectrum, that has never been a more important thing to recognize. Because seriously, now that we know more than ever that the very entertainment and genres of music that we consume every day have been controlled in terms of the people running it by the Karens, the liars, and well, I can't use that K word, but let's just say people who are named after Ice Cube's 1992 album again. Well, to go into this further, when you see something like the David situation and just see how a man has been doing some of the most disgusting things a human being ever could, and making it all even worse, he has been leaving it right within his art and nobody realized it until it was way too late. Or we just see more of the Drake Karen stuff start to happen on a much scarier level, with people losing their right to speak and have their own media and creative outlets for saying the wrong thing. I mean, while you could argue that Kendrick Lamar was warning us that this problem was always way bigger than just what was happening in music, at the very least, it does seem like these problems that have been affecting us here parallel just everything going on in the bigger stage. And the reason why I think this conversation is so pressing to have is because we are in an industry where things have never been weirder, and with all of the situations from stars who got called Ice Cube's 1992 album on diss tracks, or who literally 100% are, when you have people like these making controversy the way they are and stirring things up, it's always going to cause the industry to adapt going forward. And with something like this whole case around David, having the music be such a gross form of confession for him, and seeing people still eating it up because his career and momentum have never been bigger, and again, while the label is trying to act like they are closing the door on his career, you know they are not mad with the song blowing up right now. Well, again, just like Kendrick Lamar has told us back in the line on Meet the Grams, and he has alluded to stuff like this on a record like GNX as well. With cases like David, and there's been so many other examples of this in the music industry, of people just doing the worst things and then talking about it on songs and hoping that nothing ever happens, and the label's just pushing and pushing this. Well, genuinely, there is so much weird and horrible stuff going on in this industry, and the labels will let it happen to get another hit song, and nobody will really blink an eye as long as the numbers are going up. But even with all of that said, while the labels will enjoy the short-term reward of having another song do well for them despite whatever the implications are, the music industry is a reactionary business, and solely focusing in on them for a second, well, once again, there is a Kendrick bar for everything, and going back to 616 in LA now, the industry is literally going through exactly what Kendrick Lamar told us has been happening, but to a greater level than ever, and in a way that we can now all see the writing on the wall for, which, well, is showing that they are eating themselves apart, as with seemingly the consequences of everything recently being exposed. Well, while there are issues to varying degrees and on varying sides of the spectrum, with things concerning free speech around Drake and Young Thug's own crash outs and how their songs or their reactions to songs have been used against them, and then situations to now stuff we are seeing with David, and then you can also throw issues people like Lil Durk have had in this, and even just other problematic stuff that artists have gotten controversy for. Well, with all these things, it is weird, because on one side of things, this is an issue about freedom of expression, but at the same time, because some weirdos have just had way too much room to tell us how they feel and express themselves with the manner they were confessing or trying to cope with what they have done to themselves in, well, overall, in an industry that wants to take away whatever they can from artists, replace them with machines to cut out as many people as possible from the already complicated splits and agreements, well, when you can explain to a boardroom that these artists bring risks and all they do is bring headache and troubles with all of the reactions and problematic things they may be doing that's going into the music, this is just the perfect way for them to start to wipe away the control that actual creators have. But now, with all of this said, I think for Kendrick, and why both of the lyrics we looked at earlier make so much sense and make a statement more powerful when you put them together, is because when we look at the landscape of the music industry and the people within it, and then if we look at what this means for the greater music space as a whole, well, from Cupcake Drake to all of the liars who made their whole careers about hating rats just to be one, and then people like David, and well, there has been others who the labels have let just go way too far before anything happened. I mean, of course, there is a far spectrum of real issues here, but when you see the range of them and the problems in the industry, what Kendrick Lamar has been warning us about and telling us is not just a singular topic, which when you think about the Drake stuff and suing other artists, I mean, it would just exclusively be about speech and expression and the freedom of that. But for Kendrick, it's also been a lot more, as in addition to having the right to say what you want, he's also calling on the industry, and he even alluded to this with the Puff stuff, to just practice, not even, I don't want to say morals and ethics, but just basic human decency. And I'm not saying or think that Kendrick means that he expects that the industry is gonna do better, because, well, look at where we are at now. But what I am saying is that he does believe by talking like a human and being real and making listeners aware that the things we are and have been seeing are just not normal, while holding everybody more accountable will only make things better off at the very least. And really, when we look at these very issues, this is what Kendrick Lamar attempted to try to speak on at the Super Bowl halftime show. And that's also why, especially when you know that Super Drake was there and who Kendrick was speaking to on the grand scale, how it just ended up being more powerful than ever. Because in a world from all corners, when we look at the music lens from Karen Drake and all of the other crash out losers, to then just everything else, at this specific show, Kendrick Lamar stood for something that was so unapologetically himself and powerful. And from just standing on the idea that you can't take words away, and then bringing that to the next level, he didn't just call out, but he made fun of somebody for loving to sue. I mean, again, when you just understand that we are in a time where the right to speak has never been more pressed on, the double message especially that this show has is really just mind-blowing when we look at it now. And really within this show, again, to look at these other messages beyond just the right to speak. With Kendrick doing a song that is so spiritually him in Man at the Garden, which really when we see that he did this at the Super Bowl and in an industry and landscape surrounded by everything that he has been and was right there, again, there's just layers and layers added to the value and meaning of all of this. When we just stack all of this together, I think at the very least, no matter if you love him or hate him, what you do have to admit about Kendrick Lamar is that he is the biggest beacon for free expression in an industry where everybody is just silencing up and walking away and only caring about themselves. And there is nobody doing more for the future of art and the way all of this will go down than him. And also, and this is big, when you look at what Kendrick is trying to actually bring back to the industry by doing all of this, he's really trying to get away from the era of deception and psychopaths who have kept running things into the ground and who are keeping these machines going, but at the worst quality possible. Because when you have these labels and artists trying to sell us back their horror stories or something that is causing others to act out in a way where it's performative and harmful, well, this is what the dangers of the Drake era and just the modern way the music industry has been run as a whole has really brought on everybody. Because whether you're faking it till you make it or you actually did it, I mean, again, this is a good way to break it down. We see it when Drake keeps trying to allude to the fact that he was responsible for something with X, or now we're also seeing it with the entire David situation. The whole system has just been designed in a way where the worst things have been pushed to the forefront from all of these people who collectively together can only ever be viewed together for being Hall of Famers in the Legion of Lame. And honestly, when I look around at the current state of everything, from Drake to Young Thug to David to things just going on in the media world beyond music, I don't know if you guys do this, but I personally think about like once a day how lucky we are that Kendrick Lamar really did decide to do the things that he did exactly when he did it. Because it really does feel like sometimes he is the only person who actually cares about the stuff going on in terms of the implications of what all of this is gonna do to rap and music and art if it went unchecked. And he's also the only person who is really speaking to us and who is not afraid to put his name on the line when things are important. And so really, when we just break down where we are at and Kendrick Lamar's relationship and connection to all of it, on one hand, while he has wanted to let these rappers and losers know that he is onto them and he is going to expose them for their mistakes and they haven't been able to get away with the musical and moral garbage that they have been trying to pull on people like they used to, and that has been a big part of his run since like that, I really do believe that Kendrick also just wants us to have conversations like the ones we are having right now, which just end up challenging us to think about the very things going on right before our eyes and to see patterns and overall put the picture together. That a lot of the stuff we are seeing in rap music, but also in all of entertainment and media right now, is just a sham. And if you're not thinking about the deeper meanings behind some of the things going on, or are not mindful of what these people want you to get sucked in and lost your humanity from, I don't know what to tell you because you're probably not watching this video, but once again, to bring this back to Kendrick Lamar's music, because there is a bar for literally everything and everything we are talking about here, this is what the final verse of Kendrick's favorite song from GNX, Man at the Garden, is about, which for Kendrick, in this part of this beautiful and underrated track, we see him manifest his luck and fortune all while at the same time pleading to the Lord, where in a world of Drakes and Davids, to keep all these bad people away from him and to get this energy off of him. And really, for us who are seeing hip-hop go through this transitional phase for so many reasons, and just the very premise of free expression be challenged in it and beyond, I think we should all keep this verse within our minds, because more than ever, we need to keep all this bad energy away from us. And also, for all the losers and crash outs who are trying to run around with ego controlling their every move like Drake, Super Drake, and these other weirdos who are trying to get away with the worst, we need to just keep asking the question forever. And once again, there's a Kendrick bar for everything. Why do they think they deserve to be the greatest of all time? And so now, with all of this said, let me know, what do you think about how Kendrick Lamar has been letting us know that the music industry is not what we believe, and how it has never been more important to just get out there and say what you want to stand on? Now listen, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about all of this. And listen, if you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for supporting. It really does help me out. Channel memberships are now live if you want to join and help us out there, or you can just leave a like and subscribe. It is genuinely more than I could ever ask for. Now listen, in the meantime, as you wait for me to return, if you want to see how before this, Drake is also just doing some really whack stuff, which at the same time as he is being the mega Karen, it's really just embarrassing how desperate he is to try and mitigate Kendrick Lamar's run and to try and get back on top. Well listen, this is a good one that you don't want to miss, so if you haven't seen this video already, check it out right now.